Mother, observe her. A complete dropout, yet she still cannot clean a floor adequately. This illustrates the importance of education, mother. After 7 years, the only certificate she possesses is a damp rag. Do it again. This time do it correctly. Adanna remained silent. Not a word from you. Chioma is correct. She has an education. She comprehends these matters more effectively. Your sister, is she older than you? Yes. She did not complete her schooling. She merely remained in the village. Music, she appears quite aged. That is her concern. Who cares? Adanna, always permit the educated one to speak first. Chioma must have the floor. Music, we are all ears. Yes, mother. When their father passed away, there was only sufficient money for one daughter's tuition. Adanna was 17. She returned her own fees to the tin box. She never resumed her education. For 7 years she deprived herself, labored tirelessly, and sent away a man who loved her. Also her sister could graduate. Her mother never once expressed gratitude. Her sister remarked, "It is what it is. What she constructed in silence will shatter you." The day they laid Obi-Or and Wanchukwu to rest, the harmattan blew harshly across the compound, scattering red dust over the mourner's black attire as if it had more significant matters to attend to. His wife, Ngozi, wept loudly, the kind of weeping that craved an audience. His younger daughter, Chioma, 14 and soft-faced, nestled against her mother's side and wept alongside her. His elder daughter, Adanna, 17, stood apart from both near the gate, her eyes dry and an expression on her face that unsettled the older women. Not sorrow but calculation. She was already tallying what remained. 3 days after the burial, Adanna sat at the table with the small tin box her father had hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside were 4,200 naira, a school fees receipt, a land document for the half-acre behind the house, and a photograph of him as a young man smiling at something beyond the frame. She organized everything on the table and gazed at it for an extended period. Her mother appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing with that?" "I am counting our resources, Mama. And? Chioma's school fees are due at the end of the month, and mine are as well. There is only enough for one of us." The ensuing silence was laden with the answer that was already understood. Chioma cannot miss school. She is the one who excels academically. Adanna gazed steadily at her mother. "I understand." She refrained from saying anything further. She folded the receipt, returned it to the tin, and closed the lid. That was the moment, unceremonious and unheralded, when Adanna diverged from the path her life had been on and embarked on an entirely new journey. By the following week, she had already spoken to Mama Ezine about washing her family's clothes every Saturday. By the second week, she had made arrangements with 2 additional households. By the end of the month, she had secured 4 regular clients, a standing order for firewood delivery to the pastor's compound, and had cleared a small section of the backyard to plant pepper and ugwu. Chioma departed for school on a Monday morning with a new bag contributed by their father's brother, along with the 4,000 naira that Adanna pressed into her hand. "Adanna, are you not returning to school?" "Not this term." "What about next term?" "Just go," she replied while putting on her work boots. The village had a way of observing without seeming to observe. By the second month, people had noticed the elder Nwachukwu girl rising before dawn and returning after dark, her hands rough and cracked by the time she turned 18. She sold pepper soup on Friday nights near the motor park. She braided hair. She fetched water for the elderly women who could not go to the borehole themselves. She accomplished all of this quietly, without complaint or show. Old Mama Ofi, who had lived long enough to recognize a particular kind of hardship, stopped Adanna one afternoon on the way to the market. "You are exhausting yourself, my daughter." "I am not dying, Mama. I am working." "Does your sister know what you are doing to support her education?" "She is aware of my affection for her." "That suffices." Mama gazed at her for an extended moment before placing a small bundle of kola nut into her palm, reminiscent of the way elderly women bestow blessings that they cannot articulate. Chioma returned home for the Christmas holiday, bringing with her excellent grades and the dust of the city on her slippers. She was now more animated, brimming with stories of her experiences and knowledge, and the house seemed to mold itself around her presence as it always had. "Behold my daughter, the top of her class. Second, Mama, but I will be first by Easter. Their mother laughed heartily, the kind of laughter reserved solely for Chioma. Adanna entered from the backyard, carrying a pot and still dressed in her farming attire. Her hands bore the marks of soil. She placed the pot down and began serving the food without needing to be prompted. Adanna, come and listen to what transpired at school. Chioma narrated the tale using her hands and her entire body. It was an engaging story. Adanna listened attentively, smiling at all the appropriate moments. That is wonderful, Chioma. You are excelling. You should return to school. Surely by now, everything has calmed down. Do not trouble your sister. Adanna is content where she is. This was stated casually, as if it were merely a comment about the weather. Adanna continued to stir the soup. It was then that she first realized her mother did not plan for any changes. In January, a man from the neighboring compound, Ikenna, 26, who had just come back from his apprenticeship in Onitsha, began lingering near the pepper soup stand on Friday nights longer than it took to eat. He was a decent man. He was respectful. He regarded Adanna as someone worthy of attention. After 3 Fridays, he found a reason to speak. You rise very early. There is much to accomplish. I have been observing. I have noticed that you work harder than anyone in this village. She looked at him, then truly looked. He was not unattractive. In fact, he was the type of man she might have wished for in an alternate version of her life. My mother is not accepting visitors this season. She is still in mourning. I can wait, she spoke softly, so softly that it nearly resembled the act of closing a door. Yet it was indeed that. She had already calculated the implications. A husband signified her own household. Her own household indicated that there would be no one left to cover Chioma's second-year tuition, her third year or her final year. Ikenna waited 2 additional Fridays before he ceased his visits. Adanna observed the void he left and filled it with increased work. By the time Chioma commenced her second year at university, Adanna had ceased to view her life as a sacrifice. Sacrifice suggested loss. Instead, she chose to perceive it as a gift she was offering, willingly, entirely, without expectation of return. This, she would later recognize, was her initial significant error. Not the act of giving, but the assumption that those who receive freely given gifts remember the hand that bestowed them. Chioma graduated on a Thursday in July, and by Friday the entire village was aware. Ngozi donned her finest George wrapper and strolled to the market with her head held high as if she had authored the degree herself. She purchased palm wine for the men congregating under the Udala tree, and small chops for the women who came to extend their congratulations. She recounted the tale of Chioma's achievements 3 times, with each retelling becoming slightly more impressive than the previous one. Adanna heard the festivities from the backyard, where she was laundering a neighbor's bedsheets. She wrung out the water from the fabric, hung it on the line, and returned inside to prepare the evening meal. No one summoned her to join in the celebration. Nevertheless, she placed the pot on the fire. Chioma returned home 2 weeks later with a box of belongings, a certificate in a cardboard tube, and the distinct energy of someone who has just realized they surpassed their origins. She was not unkind, at least not yet. She embraced Adanna at the door and produced a small wrapped gift from her bag, a hand cream, the luxurious type that exuded the scent of shea and something exotic. For your hands. I noticed last Christmas they were becoming rough, she said with warmth. She expressed it with warmth. Yet Adanna perceived an underlying message, one of observation, classification, and a subtle assessment of the distance between them. She accepted the cream, thanked her sister, and placed it on the shelf, where it remained unopened for several months. By September, Chioma had secured a position at a logistics company in Enugu, which required her qualifications. The salary was substantial, city wages, and it was deposited into her account on the last day of each month, akin to a promise fulfilled. She sent a portion home, not a large amount, but sufficient for Ngozi to cease requesting contributions from Adanna for household expenses, and to start asking Chioma instead. This transition occurred gradually and then entirely, much like water rerouting after a stone is displaced. Adanna took note of this change. She remained silent. She redirected the funds she had been contributing to the household towards repairing the roof that had been leaking since the year following their father's death. She undertook this without any announcement. Once the repairs were completed, Ngozi observed the fresh paint and remarked, "Chioma has been incredibly generous since she started that job." Adanna picked up her basket and headed to the market. A family meeting was convened in December. Ngozi's brother, Uncle Emeka, had traveled from Aka with a land dispute requiring family consensus concerning a small section of their late father's estate that a neighbor was attempting to claim. He assembled the family in the main room, including himself, Ngozi, Chioma, Adanna, and 2 cousins who had driven in from Nui. They took their seats. Emeka presented the issue. The neighbor had submitted a petition. They needed to formulate a unified response before the new year. "So what course of action shall we take?" Chioma was the first to speak, confidently referencing something she had read regarding land tenure. The cousins listened attentively. Emeka nodded in agreement. Ngozi gazed at her daughter with the awe of a creator marveling at their own creation. Then, Adanna interjected. "The petition will not be upheld. Father registered that land in 1987. I possess the documents. The neighbor only constructed his fence in 2019. We have photographs from prior to that period." "Oh, are you sure?" "We present both to the council, and the case concludes before it even begins." A daring approach, Adanna. It might succeed. What if they challenge the evidence? We have the witnesses. We are prepared. A brief silence ensued. Then Chioma chuckled, a short, instinctive laugh, the kind that escapes before decorum can intervene. "Adanna, we are discussing a legal procedure. This is not merely about displaying photographs to the council elders. The council elders are precisely the ones who will make the decision. That is how it operates here. That is how it used to be. Times have changed. Let us consider all perspectives." Chioma is correct. She is educated. She comprehends these matters more thoroughly. It was stated plainly, without malice, which made it almost worse. A factual assertion, akin to saying the sky is gray or the well is dry. Adanna reclined in her chair. She did not dispute. She did not elevate her voice. She clasped her hands in her lap and gazed out the window, listening to the remainder of the meeting proceed without her. Her idea lingered unrecognized in the room like smoke that no one wished to acknowledge. Ultimately, they engaged a lawyer from Awoka who charged 40,000 naira, reviewed the case, and instructed them to bring the land registration document and any photographs taken before the fence was erected. Precisely what Adanna had suggested 40,000 naira earlier. No one mentioned it. Chioma visited less frequently as the months went by, but when she did come, she brought gifts. Bags of rice, body lotion, a small generator for the house that brought Ngozi to tears of gratitude. Each arrival was a celebration. Each departure was lamented. Adanna was always present. That was the issue with being perpetually available. You became like furniture, essential, overlooked, and unremarkable. During Easter, Chioma invited a friend from Enugu, a colleague named Adiz, who had long nails and spoke Igbo with a city accent. Adanna returned from the farm while they were in the parlor, and Chioma introduced them. "This is my elder sister." That was all. No name, no mention of her accomplishments or identity, merely a designation within the family hierarchy, as if Adanna were merely a piece of furniture being shown to a visitor. Adiz offered a polite smile and resumed her conversation. Later that evening, Adanna overheard them in the kitchen, their voices low but still audible. "Your sister, is she older than you?" "Yes, she never completed her education. She remained in the village." "Ah, that is unfortunate." "It is what it is." Adanna lingered outside the kitchen door for a moment. Then she retreated to the backyard, settled on the low stool by the firewood pile, and remained there until nightfall. It is what it is. 7 years. 7 years of waking at 4 a.m., hands cracked from labor, a man she had sent away, a school she had left behind, and a life she had neatly folded and stored away so that Chioma could stand in that kitchen and utter, "It is what it is." She did not shed tears. The depth of her pain had transcended the realm where tears could reach. The final night occurred on a Wednesday in November. It was ordinary in every way, except that it was the last. Adanna had prepared egusi soup and pounded the yam herself. The table was set. They were dining together, the three of them, when Ngozi began discussing a plot of land a family friend was selling, a potential investment, something to think about. Adanna had a thought. She opened her mouth. Adanna, let Chioma speak. She is knowledgeable about business. Adanna closed her mouth. She finished her meal. She washed the dishes. She retreated to her room and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. She had previously felt invisible. Hunger, fatigue, loneliness. She had absorbed all of it, but this was different. This was her mother in her father's home, seated at a table that remained intact due to her efforts, instructing her to remain silent. She lingered in the darkness for an extended period. Eventually she rose, retrieved her old travel bag from beneath the bed, and began to pack slowly and quietly, without any theatrics. She had departed before the rooster crowed. The room she vacated was tidy, with the bed made and the floor swept. The hand cream that Chioma had gifted her remained unopened on the shelf. The only items missing were her travel bag, her father's photograph, and the small tin box containing the land document. She took nothing that did not belong to her, and left nothing that required an explanation. Ngozi discovered the situation at 6:30, when she went to wake Adanna for morning prayers. She paused in the doorway of the vacant room for a considerable moment. Then, she proceeded to the kitchen, prepared her tea, and sat down. She did not raise an alarm immediately. Perhaps a part of her had anticipated this. Chioma called at 8 o'clock, her usual morning check-in. Your sister has left. Left for where? I am unsure. She packed a bag during the night and departed. Did something occur? Nothing occurred. You know how Adanna is. She has always been overly sensitive. Should I return home? For what purpose? She will return when she tires of wherever she believes she is going. She spoke with the assurance of a woman who had never considered the possibility of being mistaken. She completed her tea and continued with her morning routine. By midday, the neighbors were aware. Mama Ezine, who had employed Adanna's services for 9 years, received the news and promptly came to the compound, her wrapper still untied from her afternoon rest. When did she leave? It appears she left last night. And you are just sitting here? You are not searching for her? She is an adult. She left of her own volition. That girl has been sustaining this family with her bare hands since her father's passing. If she has departed, it is because something within her has shattered. You ought to feel apprehensive. She departed because Chioma has succeeded, and jealousy has taken root. It's as straightforward as that. Mama lingered in the compound for a moment longer, observing Ngozi with an expression that was neither pity nor contempt, but rather resided in the space between the two. She then tightened her wrapper and returned to her own house without uttering another word. Chioma returned home that weekend, not out of concern. She convinced herself it was to check on her mother, which was largely accurate. She stood in Adanna's room for a while, gazing at the tidy bed and the unopened hand cream. A fleeting and uncomfortable sensation stirred in her chest, which she suppressed before it could evolve into something she would need to confront. She didn't even leave a note. That is Adanna, ever the dramatist. Departing without a word is not dramatic, Mama. It is quite the opposite. Do not begin to feel sympathy for her. She made her decision. Chioma picked up the hand cream from the shelf and held it in her hands. It remained unopened, and she placed it back down. She refrained from mentioning Adanna again that weekend, and her mother did the same. By Sunday evening, their conversation shifted to other topics. They discussed Chioma's promotion prospects, a cousin's forthcoming wedding, and the cost of tomatoes. The village continued its rhythm as villages do, oscillating between noise, silence, and eventual forgetfulness. No one truly searched for Adanna. Chioma made a single phone call to a distant cousin in Onitsha. Have you seen her? When the response was negative, she noted it and moved on. Ngozi inquired around the market once, somewhat perfunctorily, as one does when seeking a missing item they have already resolved to replace. 3 weeks after Adanna's exit, Ngozi converted her room into a storage area, and eventually, a space for Chioma to sleep during her visits. The bed remained unchanged, but the shelf was cleared. Only Mama Ezine, aged and observant, paused as she passed the compound and noticed the altered window curtain. She remained silent to everyone. Yet she began to pray softly for Adanna. These were the types of prayers meant for those whom the world has consumed. 3 years went by. Chioma received a promotion. She relocated to a more spacious apartment in Enugu. It featured 2 bedrooms and a small balcony, the pictures of which she sent to their mother. Ngozi visited twice, returning each time to discuss the bathroom tiles and the view from the sitting room window. During Christmas, Chioma sent money along with a new television, and the entire family gathered in the compound to witness Ngozi receiving it like royalty. Adanna's name was not mentioned at Christmas. Her absence had been redefined, first as obstinacy, then as a lack of success, and ultimately as simply the way things were. The narrative the family shared was tidy. The younger sister had toiled and triumphed, while the elder sister had shown no ambition. What could be done? However, Mama Ezine remembered. She recalled the calloused hands, the 4 a.m. firewood gathering, the Friday pepper soup, and the school fees pressed into her younger sister's hand. Snorts. She remembered but remained silent because no one had inquired, and because some truths, when voiced in the wrong silence, only served to make the speaker appear resentful. In the 4th year, a trader from the village returned from ABA with a tale. He had attended a business meeting with suppliers, distributors, and small manufacturers, where he encountered a woman who seemed familiar. Poised, elegantly dressed, she spoke to men twice her age with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. He did not approach her but inquired among others. The name he received was not one he anticipated. Upon returning to the village, he mentioned it casually to his wife. His wife then relayed the information to Mama Ezine. Mama Ezine held on to this news for 3 days before sharing it with anyone else. When she finally decided to speak, she selected her audience with care. Not Ngozi, not yet. She conveyed this to the women at the borehole in a hushed tone, akin to sharing a truth that seems implausible. They claim that Obiora's eldest daughter is thriving in the city. The women whispered about her having a business. Which Adanna? The one who departed. The one who was forced out. Ngozi received this information through the grapevine, diluted by the time it reached her. It was easy to dismiss. However, people enjoy gossiping. They observe a woman engaged in small business and tend to embellish the story. When her mother called to share the rumor, Chioma laughed. Adanna? A businesswoman? Mama, please. And that was the end of it. They categorized it as village gossip and left it at that. Yet the rumor persisted. It resurfaced. Different voices, same narrative. A contract here, a warehouse there, employees, suppliers, a woman who had arrived with nothing and created something unexpected. Still, Ngozi and Chioma chose not to investigate. Pride is a door that can only be opened from within, and neither had yet reached a point of desperation to knock. That moment would arrive. It always does. On a Tuesday during the rainy season, in the midst of a phone call with a doctor whose voice offered no solace, Ngozi's hand began to shake. The diagnosis was not unfamiliar. They had sensed something was amiss for weeks. However, the figure the doctor quoted for surgery was the type of amount that drains the vibrancy from a room. She reached out to Chioma. Chioma fell silent for an extended moment. How much? It's very serious, my child. How much? Ngozi revealed the figure. Another silence ensued, even longer this time. Outside, the rain began to fall, the slow, heavy kind that is difficult to stop. Ngozi stood by the window, listening to her daughter breathe on the other end of the line, and for the first time, she felt the acute terror of needing assistance with no adequate place to turn. The name neither of them had uttered in 4 years drifted through the room like a draft beneath a closed door. They refrained from speaking it, yet it lingered in the air. They attempted everything else first. Chioma depleted her savings account on a Wednesday, yet it proved insufficient. She sought loans from 2 colleagues and a cousin in Lagos, but it still fell short. Ngozi sold her late husband's radio, her fine set of china, and the gold earrings she had worn on her wedding day. Still, it was inadequate. They reached out to the church welfare committee and contacted relatives in Amuwo, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. They received sympathy, small contributions, and prayers. With the surgery date just 5 weeks away, they were still lacking more than half of the required funds. During a conversation outside the hospital, while Chioma was on the phone, her voice trembling, a man nearby turned to her. Excuse me, I don't mean to intrude, but I overheard you mention Inkwili village. Yes, that is our hometown. I know a woman from that village. She operates a distribution business here in Onitsha, dealing in fabric and provisions. She is quite successful. I have conducted business with her 3 times. What is her name? He provided her name. Chioma stood frozen for a moment. Then, she expressed her gratitude, ended her call, and sat on the bench outside the hospital in the light afternoon rain, remaining still for an extended period. She refrained from informing her mother immediately. Instead, she returned home and contemplated the possibility, the implications, and the humiliation it entailed. Soon after, the doctor called again regarding a deposit needed to secure the surgery date, and the decision ceased to be a choice. Chioma, oh mama. Oh mama. I believe I know where Adanna is. What? People have been saying she is in Onitsha. I think it might be true. After everything, you wish to go and plead with her? I want to go and locate my sister. She abandoned us. Chioma gazed at her mother for a prolonged moment, a look filled with years of gradual understanding. Did she, mama? Ngozi remained silent, her gaze returning to her Bible as she turned a page she did not read. They departed for Onitsha the following morning. It took 3 days to confirm the address. A business connection led to a supplier, who then introduced a woman in the Nui fabric market familiar with the warehouse, which in turn led to a gate. The compound was substantial, lacking in ostentation, devoid of excess, and without fanfare, yet it exuded a sense of solidity that comes from being constructed with patience rather than mere chance. A painted gate, a modest garden, and 2 young men at the entrance inquired about their names and purpose with the composed authority of individuals employed by someone deserving of protection. Upon providing their names, one of the men vanished inside. They waited. Ngozi stood at the gate, dressed in her church blouse, the one reserved for significant occasions, silently observing the compound. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She had aged in ways unrelated to the passage of time. The gate swung open. Adanna emerged, clad in a simple blue kaftan, her hair wrapped modestly. She had matured, not in weight, but in the manner one does when they have finally experienced sufficient nourishment, rest, and tranquility. She resembled herself, yet as a version that had been granted the space to thrive. Upon seeing them, she halted. There was no smile, no frown. She regarded them with the unwavering gaze of someone who had envisioned this moment so many times that it had lost its capacity to catch her off guard. Adanna. Mama. Please come inside. They settled in her parlor, which featured genuine chairs, a central rug, and framed fabric art adorning the walls. Through the back window, they observed a storage yard where 2 workers were organizing crates. A woman knocked, entered momentarily, set down a tray of water and kola nut, and then exited. Chioma surveyed everything with wide, silent eyes. She had crafted a speech during the drive from the village, but it had evaporated the instant she stepped through the gate. Ngozi was the first to speak, and not in a gentle manner. She fell to her knees from the chair, collapsing onto the rug with the heavy burden of a woman who had exhausted all options and, beneath the desperation, the weight of the falsehoods she had been telling herself. My daughter, please forgive your mother. I have wronged you. I was blind and foolish, failing to see you. I did not recognize you even when you stood before me every day. Now, she wept genuinely, not the feigned sorrow displayed at her husband's graveside, but something much older, deeper, and more painful. Adanna observed her mother crying on the floor, and refrained from offering comfort. Not yet. Perhaps never, but she allowed her to grieve. Then Chioma spoke. Adanna, her voice devoid of all pretense. The city accent, the confidence, the careful facade of success had vanished. What remained was merely a frightened girl. Adanna, I am sorry. I understand that this word feels inadequate. I realize there is nothing I can articulate that. She paused. Music, resumed. You sacrificed everything for me. Your education, your future, a man who wished to marry you. Yes, I was aware of Ikenna. Mama Ezem informed me years later. You relinquished it all so I could have a life, and I stood in your mother's kitchen, telling my friend you were worthless. I stated it as what it is, as if you were merely a problem that had resolved itself, and I stood in your mother's kitchen, telling my friend you were worthless. I stated it is what it is, as if you were merely a problem that had resolved itself. The room fell into a profound silence. I do not deserve your forgiveness. I am not here to seek it. I am here because our mother is dying, and you are the only one strong enough to assist her. For you have always been the strongest person in this family. We just never acknowledged it. Adanna remained silent for an extended period. When she finally spoke, her tone was steady, neither cold nor warm, the voice of a woman who had long since ceased to cry over this. After that, there was only silence as I walked away once more. Then one day I ceased my practice. I resolved that whatever was meant to happen would simply unfold. Get up, Mama. Take a seat in the chair. At the age of 17, I returned my school fees to that tin box. I convinced myself it was love, and indeed it was. Yet, there was not a single person in that house who looked at me and said, "This burden is too heavy for her to bear alone." I deprived myself of food on 3 separate occasions so that there would be funds for your second year. Were you aware of that? No, because I never shared it with you. I believe that was the essence of love, silent, complete, leaving no space for oneself. She paused. Then you sat at Papa's table, the very table I kept standing, and instructed me to be quiet. Both of you. As if I were an intruder who had stumbled in. Chioma's face had now fully crumpled. She was no longer attempting to maintain her composure. That is what shattered me, not the labor but the table. She picked up a folder from the side table. Somehow, she had known or had prepared, as meticulous individuals do for all eventualities, that this day would inevitably arrive. She placed a bank transfer document on the table. I have already transferred the full amount for the surgery to the hospital's account. I called this morning after your mother spoke to mine at the gate yesterday and reported the visit. The surgery is confirmed. Mama will be looking after you. Ngozi pressed her hands over her mouth. Chioma gazed at the document. Do you understand why, after everything we have endured? Because I refuse to become what you have become. You have forgotten what I did for you, and it has made you cruel. Her voice remained steady. I will not forget what you did to me and allow it to transform me into the same. I will not forget what you did to me and permit it to shape me into the same. That is not the woman I have forged myself into. She rose. But I need you to understand me clearly. I am not your elder sister today in the manner I once was, the one who absorbed everything and asked for nothing, who could be silenced at the dinner table. That woman is no more. I paid for her to depart. Some wounds do not heal, Chioma. They merely become more manageable, primarily because you learn to distance yourself from those who keep reopening them. She approached the parlor door and opened it. Go home. Look after Mama. Create something genuine with the life I helped you begin. She gazed at both of them, her mother and her sister, feeling the full weight of all that had transpired and what could never be changed. She stepped aside. I wish you both well. I genuinely mean that. However, this house is my sanctuary. And my sanctuary is the one thing I will not sacrifice again. Adanna, please. Adanna. They departed in the late afternoon. Ngozi walked through the gate slowly, one hand resting on Chioma's arm, glancing back once. Adanna was not watching from the window. She had already returned to her life, her workers, her yard, her tranquil and well-deserved existence. Chioma started the car and remained silent for the first hour of the drive. She held the folder containing the transfer document in her lap, staring at the road and reflecting on a 17-year-old girl counting money in a tin box, making a decision that would cost her everything, asking for nothing in return. The surgery was successful. Ngozi took 8 weeks to recover. She was quieter afterward. The illness had either extinguished something within her or perhaps restored something. She began including Adanna's name in her prayers, not as a plea, but as a form of acknowledgement. A name she uttered plainly without embellishment. 3 months later, Chioma sent a letter, not a phone call, but a handwritten letter 4 pages long. She did not seek a relationship. She did not request anything. She simply documented what she remembered in its entirety, without softening the truth. Every sacrifice she had witnessed and feigned ignorance of. It was the most sincere thing she had ever composed. Adanna received it, read it once and placed it in a drawer. She did not respond. Not yet. However, she did not discard it. And that is where the story remains. Not in reconciliation, not in destruction, but in the extended, sincere space that exists between them, where genuine healing, if it occurs at all, must develop according to its own conditions. The conclusion. Snorts. I appreciate your presence. If you have reached the conclusion of this narrative, please take a moment to click the subscribe button, so you will not miss another enchanting story like this one. Additionally, there is another delightful tale currently available on your screen. Believe me, you will not want to overlook it.